Hey everyone, this is Joanne Dunbar, and I am doing my Module 4 discussion for this week's reading. So I'm just going to jump right in and reference the first prompt, which is why and how are syllabic, morphemic, and contextual analysis and dictionary strategies useful for struggling readers? So most of the content for the readings along this particular subject was found in Chapter 9 of the gunning text. So I'm just going to start with the syllabic analysis. So a lot of students, according to this text, they may know how to decode and they may know basic phonics principles, but when it comes to multisyllabic words, that's when they really struggle. So we need to know how to break those words down for them so that they can become more confident in reading those longer words and not be so intimidated. So some of the examples that the text gives is a student who can read those one-syllable words but might not be able to read words like carpenter or passenger, even though she can read car, pen, her, and pass. So it's like she can read the parts of the words, but putting them together is typically challenging. So the basic principle behind teaching syllabic breakdown is to do just that, break down the words into syllables and then work on putting them together. So the pattern approach looks for kind of consistencies between different types of words. So if you can recognize, for example, the syllable er, in tiger, you can apply that to the word spider and know that those two words at the end of those two letters at the end of the word, no matter what, typically is going to end in er. So you kind of look for those common threads among words, and that really helps to strengthen those connections in the brain. So that's kind of the basic principle behind the syllabication. Is learning how to isolate those syllables and really teach independence and breaking the syllables apart so that the student can then do that independently and put the syllables together. Going on to morphemic instruction, so this is just teaching how different roots and affixes can help us determine the meanings of words. So we had a whole article on teaching the Greek and Latin roots and affixes, and in the article, Morphological Analysis Instruction in the Elementary Grades by Maniac, Bauman, and Maniac. That's what this article was all about, was touching on those different roots, suffixes, prefixes, and I wanted to specifically talk about the 4 criteria for selecting affixes for instruction. So it feels like an infinite number of possible prefixes and suffixes that we could teach kids, right? So we have to narrow it down, and this is on page 294 of the text. So first of all, we want to teach affixes that meet a strict definition of prefix or suffix. So it needs to come at the beginning of the word if it's a prefix and be attached to a base word. Or in the case of a suffix, it needs to go at the end of the word. So if it does not always meet that criteria, it shouldn't qualify for our instruction typically. Also, number 2 is it needs to have a consistent and concrete meaning. So we know that the prefix un, always, for practical purposes, always means not. Or dis, dis, means not. And so we need to be able to introduce those prefixes and suffixes that have that consistent meaning, because the less consistent it is, the more confusing it is for students to apply. Number 3, we need to teach affixes that have the highest frequency. So obviously we see some more than others. So ones like dis and un and full. ones that we see a lot, obviously. Miss. I could think of a ton, but we want the ones that are the highest frequency for obvious reasons. We want the ones that students are going to be using and seeing the most. Number 4, when possible, organize affixes into semantic groups or families. So this, once again, if we can kind of find common threads and strengthen those connections, that will continue to help students learn and make those building blocks easier for them when they are determining meanings of words. And that's one that I've struggled, I guess, in my own instruction with reading. I feel like I could do a lot more with breaking down morphemes and roots, but I guess I'm not always super confident, especially when it comes to the Greek and Latin roots. I'm not confident that it will always make sense to the students, and sometimes I think I don't give them enough credit, that they will recognize those meanings that might go along with roots. The prefixes and suffixes I find I'm a little more confident with. It's the roots that I tend to kind of go back and forth as to whether or not I really want to spend a lot of time on that, but according to this research in this article, it really helps with reading comprehension. Moving on to contextual analysis. So this is one that I use a lot. Just in a typical session with a student who is struggling with a meaning, context is my go-to. Just because I teach 6th grade, and so it's a little bit of a higher level, and it's kind of that stage where we're beyond phonics, and we're beyond sight words and all of those things. So we need to use the tools that more advanced readers can use. I, even as an adult, will often use, without even realizing it, context clues. If I don't know the meaning of a word, I let the context of the sentence inform my understanding of it. So in our text on page 293, they give the example of driving the meaning of the word ravenously. So the text or the passage was, the satisfied Labrador had eaten ravenously that evening, cleaning up bowls of fresh milk and plates of food with a bottomless appetite. So if the student understands that the dog is eating, first of all, and then he's cleaning up the bowls, meaning the bowls are now empty after he's eaten, he has a bottomless appetite, so seemingly endless appetite, so he's eating and eating and eating. We can safely derive that ravenously means you have a huge appetite and you're consuming a lot. So that is just kind of an example that they give, and when I'm helping my students with their vocabulary practice, they do have an exercise each week that they do where they have to fill in the blank in the sentence with the correct word. And when students struggle with that, I always go back to the context of the sentence. What is the sentence telling us that can give us clues as to what the correct word might be? And the book goes on to give us a lot of different context clues that I had never thought about. You know, I'd always been kind of aware ever since I went into my undergrad program teaching, context clues are a strategy that we need to use. Before that, I of course would even use context clues, but couldn't tell you the name or what they're called or this strategy overall. There's so much of reading comprehension that we do, and we don't realize what it even is until we are taught the explicit strategy, and then we realize we've been doing it all along. Anyway, though, even in undergrad, I knew about context clues. I've used context clues in instruction, but I like how our book breaks it down into several different categories of context clues. Definition, synonym, comparison, contrast, function indicators, example, experience, pictorial clues, and combined morphological and semantic clues. So it's kind of basically identifying how our brain uses these clues in a sentence to make associations, to pick out the right meaning of the word that we're trying to define. And then finally, for the first prompt, dictionary skills, I would say this is one that's becoming a little less relevant in our society today because of the prevalence of online dictionaries, and I am all for teaching students how to work smarter and not harder. So I don't think that we should force students to use a hard copy dictionary just because it's a skill that we learned when we were kids or whatever, and keep it from them that, hey, you can go to dictionary.com and just type in the word and it'll give it to you. I know when I need to define a word, which does happen, I don't pull out a paper dictionary. I don't think I even own a paper dictionary at my home. I think I do in my classroom, but it's way faster to just go online. So I did want to touch on that because that is a real factor now when we come to dictionary skills. I know when I was in school and we learned about the dictionary, one of the huge elements of learning dictionary skills was ABC order. And I think that is very crucial because everyone, it seems, in all sorts of disciplines, I know I do, but so many careers, you have to know how to alphabetize things. You need to know how to find things alphabetically and put things in order alphabetically. So that's an important one. But as far as actually using the dictionary, I do appreciate the text does mention on page 297, instruction should be functional. However, students will need some direct instruction in key dictionary skills. And it goes on to mention modeling the use of the dictionary when a genuine need arises. I know that the other day, a couple weeks ago, we were doing a escape room activity in the media center where students were using different comprehension activities to figure out a combination that would open a lockbox and they would get a prize. And that was really fun and engaging for them. Well, one of the activities was defining some words. And so I decided to make it a little more challenging for them, and I said you cannot use an online dictionary in this case. We're in the library, there's lots of paper dictionaries, you need to use that to find the word. I don't think that we will ever be at a point where a text hard copy dictionaries are completely and totally obsolete. So I think it is a skill that they need to be able to know. And I also appreciate that the text talks about we can't just rely on students to look up the word and immediately know how to use it from that definition that it gives them, because often those definitions are really very academic and don't really translate it into student-friendly language. So we need to be able to find that definition and then translate it into something that's meaningful to the students. Also, I like that it talked about the pronunciation guide. I experienced this just the other day. One of our vocabulary words this 2 weeks is rendezvous, and I made sure in my students' vocabulary books it has a pronunciation phonetic spelling for them, but they don't use it, they don't look at it, it means nothing to them. So I had to make sure to go through that, especially that word, and say, hey, this is how you pronounce this word because it does not look like that. Of course, they were all wanting to pronounce it rendezvous. So I had to go through that with them, and so knowing how to use that pronunciation guide that is found in a dictionary is useful for them as well. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to go to the second prompt, which is what components should be included in an effective vocabulary development program for struggling readers. And vocabulary is something that I do a lot. My computer is about to die, so I'm going to take a second to plug it in. Alright, so the vocabulary instruction. We do a vocabulary instruction as part of our 6th grade reading curriculum, and the students have a vocabulary book that they purchase at the beginning of the year. And we do 20 words every 2 weeks, and so the students spend some time doing homework. We do some in-class activities. We haven't done as many as I would like, honestly. I'm kind of at the mercy of my PLC. That's just kind of how my school works. and I'm the newbie. So that's kind of been a struggle for me, is that sometimes I wish that we would focus more on things like vocabulary in our everyday routines and instruction rather than just letting it be homework and then quizzing over it every 2 weeks. Um, so that's something I have lots of thoughts about. But I do like in our text, and I'll come back to that in a second, but in our text, it kind of breaks down the stages of word learning. So, like the different tiers of a student's possible knowledge of a word. So, first we have learning to read known words. So, this is a word that a student already has in his or her language, but they just don't know how to read it yet. So, that's first vocabulary. And as a sixth grade teacher, that might not be something that I encounter that much, because at this point, most of the words that we speak on a daily basis, students already know how to read, but that definitely still happens. Um, then number two is learning new meanings for noun words. Um, so it might be a word that you know, but there's another meaning that you didn't know, and that you're learning. And then number three is learning new words that represent known concepts. So maybe you have this idea or this concept of something in your head, but you don't know the word for it. So as soon as you know the word for it, you're like, oh, so that's what that is. And then finally, number four, learning new words that represent new concepts. So when we get into like content area vocabulary, especially, which is something that at my school the reading program is supposed to focus heavily on. We're talking terms and definitions that they're going to be learning in their science and social studies classes. And so they're learning a new concept, a new thing that they haven't known before, and the label for it. So it's kind of like double duty. And then number five, clarifying and enriching the meanings of known words. So might be a word that you know on a certain level, and there are different applications or shades of meaning for that word that we can teach students. And then task 6 is moving words from receptive to expressive vocabulary. So it's one thing to learn the word, and this is something that I kind of struggle with in my own vocabulary instruction, because we're kind of wheeling and dealing these new words to students, and we're testing over them every 2 weeks, and then we move on. And I would like somehow to be going back and revisiting these words, because it's one thing to learn them and to be able to pass a test on them, but then if you don't continue to use it and see it, it's not really like you learned it, at least not to your full potential. So the chapter goes on to really go through so many strategies and different levels of knowledge that students can have, and different ways to teach vocabulary. And there's so many different ways, and this is, like I said, kind of a challenge for me in my own teaching, is that I feel like there's a lot that I could be doing as far as vocabulary instruction that I just haven't explored yet, because we have this routine that my colleagues are used to going through, and that's just kind of what we do. And my school is very PLC heavy, like, hey, you need to be doing all the same stuff as your PLC, and so I kind of struggle between trying to apply my own principles of teaching that I believe in versus just trying to stay in step with my colleagues. And so kind of the routine for them has been, we give a pre-test, we give homework, the students do the homework, we check the homework halfway through, and that just involves giving them the answers to the homework, and they check it, we move on, and then the next week they have the next part of homework, check the homework, and then on the last day we take a quiz. We don't really do a lot of working on the words and teaching the words and doing strategies for the words in class, and that's something that I think is kind of a shame, and I really want to change. Honestly, just last week, we decided to do something different and do a vocabulary game in class. And I thought that was really fun. I like designing games for my students. And I thought it was really meaningful. We did a Connect 4, so I had this digital Connect 4 grid on my smart board, and we used Post-its instead of the little chips, but it, just really simple, divided the class into 2 teams. And I started out just asking questions from the textbook, and the students could use their books. And every time a team got a word right, they would come up and put a sticky note in one of the holes on the board, and when they got a certain number in a row, they would be the winner. And they really enjoyed it. And what I really enjoyed, after a while, I decided to branch out and kind of just conversationally start talking. And like, for example, for the word rendezvous, which is one of our words, I said, so you guys this weekend might decide to meet up with your friends at the mall. I don't really know what kids do these days on the weekend, but let's just say you went to the mall and you were like, we're going to meet at 4 o'clock at this spot. You guys are planning a what? And so just kind of applying the words to their real life situations. I talked about my cat a lot. They know I love my cat, and I talk about my cat a lot in class. And so one of our words is rotund, and so I talked about how she's laying around kind of lazy and she's getting fatter, and so what is she being? And there's rotund, and then another word is sluggish. And so just kind of using that conversational, using it in speech, they seem to really gravitate towards that and connect with that. We also have things like graphic organizers that are helpful. Frayer models is something that I've done. I like using pictures. I've done games where I just have a picture that I say, hey, here's a word, here's a picture that's associated with one of our vocabulary words. What word can it be? They enjoy that too. Memes and GIFs, things like that are relevant to them, I really enjoy. But at any rate, this video is getting very long, so I'm going to go ahead and stop now. But hopefully you found something to connect to, and I look forward to reading you guys' posts and talking with you. Have a great week.